Well, thank you guys for joining me live today. It is Friday. I'm bringing you a special episode of Pursuit of Purpose Live. And the topic of the day for discussion is going to be generational curses. And it's a fascinating topic. It gets thrown around quite a bit. The concept of generational curses gets used and misused and abused, in my opinion. I think people throw that phrase around as an excuse a lot, and I think that's wrong. In my opinion, I don't believe it's right to use a generational quote unquote generational curse as an excuse, but to give a little context, opening up the discussion. And if you're joining me live, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of our Pursuit of Purpose audience. And I want to invite you to please actively participate in this discussion. This is something that has an impact on all of our lives, whether it's you personally or someone you know, but the results and baggage of generational curses affect all of us. And to define what I mean by this is, it's not a mystical or necessarily a religious thing, but it's a pattern of behavior, a pattern of thinking, a pattern of choices that get passed down through generations, through communities and families, and it can be indoctrination or idealized thought. And this causes long-term impacts, long-term patterns of stress, distress, destruction, and chaos, and sometimes confusion, and even all the way to the point of violence. And the challenge behind all this is, can we be open enough? Can we be honest enough to actively question our own, what we call our convictions, our trains of thought? Can we do that? Can we be bold enough, brave enough, and have enough courage to say that I would like to examine my own thinking to see if it is factual, truthful, or if it was an idealized concept placed inside of my mind through environmental or family inheritance. And anyway, so that's the discussion for today, and it can have both positive and negative impacts on us as a people, as a person, as a family. So I want you to understand that generational curses necessarily they don't have to be bad. They can be generational blessings. So like, I mean, there are a lot of traditions that people carry on in their families, such as the way they gather, the way they have family reunions or whatnot. Those are what I would consider generational blessings. So I want to open up the discussion and ask, before we go on too far, do any of you find yourselves impacted? Are any of you dealing with the results and personal problems coming from a negative generational curse in your life, whether it be you, your children, but do any of you out there in the audience, do you guys understand and experience any of this yourselves? And if so, what's it doing in your life? And I'd love for any of you that are willing to come join me in this discussion. I see that we've got quite a few viewers joining us on TikTok. Thank you guys for joining us. Ben Ridge, James Fox, Diana Kennedy, Bob, Alley Cat. I see a bunch of you joining. I may not catch all of your names because there are quite a few coming through, but thank you guys for being with us today. The topic is generational curses. And so what are generational curses in your life? Like, let's give an example of this, like cycles of poverty, broken families, fatherless homes, Bad communication, violence. Violence can be a generational curse. Lack of ambition, dysfunction that feels normal because it has existed for so many generations. That's all that's understood and known. So those are the tools that are passed down from parent to offspring. Children of parents who mishandle money often repeat the same mistakes unless they are blessed to learn differently and see the value in changing that behavior. So how many of you out there can be honest and talk about this? Anybody? I see quite a few of us joining in the chat here, and I appreciate you guys. So we hear the term mentioned a lot at churches and in different quote unquote religious organizations. They like to say generational curse, and you know it is mentioned in the Bible, and it is and can be tied to spiritual things. But the concept of this generational curse doesn't have to be some mystical, magical, strange, super spiritual behavior. You can, I'm not going to say I don't care, but irrespective of your personal beliefs or religious behaviors or religious practices, these generational behaviors that are passed down from one to another, they don't have to be based on religion to be understood and changed. So there's no invisible force that's holding you back. These behaviors, mindsets, and all are they're based on environmental conditioning. And I'll tell you a funny thing about they don't even have to be environmental. Like for me personally, I had the privilege of having a man in my life who was not my biological father, but he adopted me. And I didn't meet my biological father until I was much older. In fact, my wife helped me find him, and he had some really, really negative behaviors. And fascinatingly enough, in my early life, I had some of those negative behaviors. And so what I don't know for sure is that what if those behaviors, of course, I was genetically predisposed to some things, but what if I learned them, so early on in life that I can't remember it. I can't even correlate where they came from. But later on in life, I got to meet him, and we had some similarities that were just unexplainable for any other way. Like I'll give you for instance, he was mechanically inclined, of course, and I am mechanically inclined. He liked to, he taught himself how to weld. He was a good welder, and I taught myself how to weld. And he liked to hunt, fish, like the outdoors, all these same things. And I had never met the man until I was in my 30s. And it was strange how many similarities in behavior that we had, and both good and bad, unfortunately. The very fortunate thing was that I never was exposed to his addiction sorts of behavior, so I didn't pick those up. But what can we do? How do we, unfortunately, how do we normalize these generational curse type of behaviors? How does that happen? We start to look at them, and then we make excuses for them. Like what you see every day, you start to normalize. You believe that it's okay. Your culture and your community puts pressure on you to accept it as a standard, and then it can be reinforced towards destructive habits. And silence about these things, or avoiding the discussions about trauma or finances or mental health or failure, that just reinforces the behavior. And that's something that we as a society, as a culture, that's something that we can do. We can turn that tide just by being open about it, being honest, and setting our pride aside for a little bit and just saying, this is the truth about my life. These are the true things about what I've done, who I've been. And I'll give you an amazing example of somebody that's very near and dear to me who has for all intents and purposes, has broken some enormously heavy and detrimental, destructive generational curses. And that's my wife. My wife is one of the most self-reflecting, honest, genuine people that I have ever encountered. And I'm not saying that to butter her up. She's probably not even watching the show. But she has inspired me to challenge myself and my own views, because she has been so honest and so willing to become vulnerable and self-reflective. She showed me how to do it with myself. And to give you an example of that, she lives in a constant state of questioning whether what she does, says, or thinks is accurate. And she constantly does it, almost to the point, I think, that it contributes to her anxiety. And I wish she wouldn't feel that way. But what it's done for her in her state of self-reflection is that it's allowed her to question the environment and behaviors of those who influenced her early in life. And that's afforded her the ability to see clearly that, okay, just because my mom or my aunt or my grandmother behaved a certain way, I see the results that it created, and I'm not going to use that as an excuse for me to be destructive to myself and to pass that destructive behavior on to the next generations that I'll influence. And she has made choices about that have truly broken generational curses, because she does come from a lineage of addictive behaviors. She does come from a lineage of self-destructive behaviors and habits. And amazingly enough, she didn't pick them up. She chose to live a life that would not perpetuate those cycles. So she taught me a lot about how to look at myself. But how many of you out there, I mean, we've got quite a few joining now. Thank you guys for joining. D Boggs, David Warren, thank you for being here. Disciple of Jesus, Pick XE's X, JP. You guys, thank you for joining us. Monty Poe, I see you. So thank you guys for being here. But are any of you, do any of you feel like you are stuck because you are in an obvious cycle of a generational curse? And if so, what is it? What is it that you're dealing with? And I would applaud you for your courage if you were willing to share. And I guarantee you that if you are willing to, not only might it change your own life and direction and that of your kids and their kids and your complete lineage, but you may be the key, the answer to inspiring some other person who has joined this podcast and is seeking understanding, seeking to know that they're not alone in the world and that there's hope. Because so oftentimes we feel like we're isolated. We feel like the things we're experiencing are just us, and that we are lesser of a person because of it. We're weak. And in that feeling, if we could just feel like we weren't alone, we might have a sense of hope that would inspire us to start the process of change. So if any of you out there would be willing to open up a little bit and discuss your experience with what you might call or categorize as generational curse, I would very much appreciate it. James Lynch, I see you. Ann Betts, thank you for joining. Alex, Tommy Priscilla, thank you guys for being with us today. So how to recognize the signs of these type of things? If you look back on your life, especially as an adult, you look back on your life and you recognize, man, I do the same thing as so-and-so that I was around as a kid that I said I would never be like, and I don't mean the positive things. I'm talking about like take, for instance, did your dad come home from work and immediately sit on the couch or in a chair and start drinking beer? and not stop drinking beer until he essentially passed out in that chair in the same place. And do you find yourself doing that? And that's not to say that having a beer is bad. I'm not condemning that. That's not my place. But if it takes you out of your life, if it's something that you do to escape and it takes you away from your family, then you have to ask yourself, is this healthy? Is this something I would want my kids to continue after I'm gone? Because I can guarantee you this, those in your life that see what you do and how you behave, they are picking up those behaviors and they're going to repeat them. If you've got kids, they don't care what you say as much. All they care about is what they see you do. And I know you guys out there know this. You guys are smart. They see everything. They see a lot more than we give them credit for. And if if you're honest about it, and you can self-reflect and you look back on your own life, you realize that you saw everything when you were a kid. You realized what your parents were doing, even if you don't talk about it. And that's how you got the behaviors that you got. And you're not, and you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to live with that victim's mentality where those generational curses are what rule you. You have the ability to put them down and make the change. And you don't have to live in regret of the life you've lived up until now. There's nothing wrong with it. You didn't fail. You only fail if you gain the knowledge, the understanding, and the ability, and then you choose not to make the change. If you learn and gain the understanding and the wisdom of how to make yourself better and how to behave better and how to improve the future for your generations, and then you choose not to, then you get to live with the regrets. So I hope you guys out there will understand and look for these generational curses in your life and understand that they're not mystical. There are practical things you can do to simply change the behavior. So if you'll notice, a lot of our emotional things, or a lot of our habits, our generational curses, they have triggers. They're rooted in triggers. A behavior will follow a behavior, and that the leading behavior is considered a trigger. It could be an environment. It could be a color, a light. It could be just a smell. There are so many things that are triggers, and that trigger is very important. And the biggest key to breaking generational curses is, like I discussed earlier, the self-reflection aspect of it. Being honest, becoming aware. How many times do we purposefully decide to stay unaware of our own behavior? We choose to look the other way about ourselves. It's real easy, though, to talk about somebody else and say, hey, look how bad they're behaving. Look at what they're doing. And man, I wouldn't want to act like them. It's really easy to do that stuff. The hard part is being honest about ourselves. And I personally can tell you that for the first 40 years of my life, I wasn't honest with myself. And I was carrying generational curse of anger. I carried a victim's mentality. I made excuses for myself. I figured out how to be very passive aggressive. I figured out how to manipulate other people and use them for my own benefit. And I was exceptionally destructive to myself. It made me if I look back on it now, I failed my kids, I failed my wife, and I failed my community because I refused to look reflectively at my behavior and own it. But instead, I looked at my behavior and I said, well, I can justify it. I can justify it because. And that was the root of my wrong, was working to justify and excuse those destructive and chaotic behaviors that I had learned or picked up as generational curses. And because of that, I worry that I compounded them and passed them on. because there were a lot of people looking up to me and a lot of people that I had influence on. And I've gone back and apologized to quite a few of them. And, you know, a lot of them said, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. But I went ahead and explained so they would, and they forgive me. My kids are included in that. And I'm curious, are any of you out there, are you willing and able to discuss things in your life that you know you should address? Anybody? How many of you were raised by a parent who's an addict to drugs, alcohol, sexual behavior, an addict to attention? Yeah, that's an addiction too. An addict to using other people to excuse their own shortcomings. How many of you were raised by that kind of person? Any of you? Hey, Miss Lady. Let's see. Esteban, thank you for joining us. Robo Snake, hi, how you doing? Mama G, Tracy C, I see you. So I'd love to hear from you. How many of you deal daily, internally and externally, with what you would call generational curses? Well, I can tell you this. My wife and I are very fortunate. We have a lot of kids, and we are, both of us, working diligently to become better people ourselves so that we can invest into them better habits and pass down to them positive inherited behaviors. Anthony Hilly, thank you for joining. So let's talk about this. So there are some healthy habits that you can pick up to start to identify and become aware so that you can self-reflect. And they're simple. They're not complicated. As I said in the little flyer that I put out, the invite, none of this stuff is mystical, magical. None of it's super religious or spiritual. It can be super simple how-to things that allow you the freedom and ability to take charge of generational curses in your life. So how do we start to recognize unhealthy patterns? Well, that's the first step, is to become self-aware and then call them out. So how many of you, and I know this may sound silly and small, but how many of you like journal? Does anybody out there journal? Write down about, do you take notes about yourself? Do you take notes about what you're doing? Do you write down your goals? Well, if you get yourself into the practice of honestly writing things down for yourself, and if you really want to address this, even if you have never done it before, there's no wrong way to start. There's just a start. And once you start, all you can do is get better. So it'd be worth it. Get yourself a piece of paper, go into your notes on your phone, and you can even talk to it. You don't have to sit there and write it. The notes function in your phone will actually take audio dictation. So you could actually just talk to it and make notes about what you see yourself doing, and then go back and read those notes so that you can reflect. And one of the things that would help a lot, and one of the things that helped me a lot, was to get what I call an accountability partner, somebody that I could trust in my life, that I could trade stories with, trade behaviors with, somebody that they were at a place where they could be honest about themselves too, so that they could be honest with me. And then I could be honest with them about the things I was dealing with and going through. And that's hard. It's really hard to become open with someone else. But I believe it to be a very valuable part of this process. Seek yourself out, someone who may become your mentor to help you model healthier behaviors, to help you be accountable. And it's not a one-sided operation. You actually become accountable to them, and they become accountable to you, and everybody wins. There's no loser in this. But you'll develop practical strategies. So one of the biggest generational curses that's out there. We talk a lot about addiction, alcoholism, sexual things. We talk about that, but one of the biggest ones that we don't talk about as much is financial. Money matters are one of the biggest generational curses that exists. How many of you were taught how to manage and create monetary wealth by your parents or family? I see you, Rodney Owsley. Thank you for joining. Lily, thank you for joining. Ian, I see you. How many of you were taught financial strategies and financial behaviors by your family, by your family of origin? How many of you carry healthy financial habits because of the way you grew up and what you saw done in front of you? And that, I know that's a rare thing. My parents, and I'm not dogging them at all. They did a wonderful job. They did what they could with what they were equipped, and they raised me to be the best man that they could. And I'm proud. I'm proud of my upbringing. They worked with the equipment and the tools that they had. At the same time, they were working with their inherited beliefs and patterns. So they operated within those limits. But what if financial freedom and wealth could be learned for you wherever you are in your life, whatever stage you're in, whatever you've experienced, whatever debt you may have, you could still do it. And I guarantee you it's possible, guarantee it. But you're going to have to introduce yourself to true self-reflection, admitting and becoming aware of the areas that you fail, and then learning new behaviors to practice in that area. And one of the biggest ones for me was to learn that money is not limited. I grew up with a belief in scarcity. I had an ingrained idea or ideal that money was very limited in its supply. And it's simply not true. Money is, what I've learned in my later life, money actually is the easiest renewable commodity that man has ever invented. And that's exactly what it is. We invented it. It's not even real. It's just a representation of trading. So it's something that you can create and attain with simple changes in behavior. And most of our financial struggles come from inherited beliefs, inherited patterns, what would be considered generational curses. And you can change them. So breaking cycles, some other ones are like neglect, or conflict resolution. Communication is another form of a generational curse. It can be lack of the ability to effectively communicate. How many times do you talk to somebody without knowing whether or not your message was truly and healthily received? How many people out there do you wish you could create a working or healthy, functional relationship with, but you really don't know how? Those are all things that can be learned. And surrounding yourself with people who can support and grow with you rather than reinforce your old cycles is one of the biggest key elements to changing the tide, to reversing the effects of generational curses. And it's not the easy thing. It's the uncomfortable thing. But growth doesn't lie in comfort. And health doesn't lie in comfort. Growth, life, and progress all lie just outside of the boundaries of comfort. So I would challenge you, get outside your comfort zone. Surround yourself with people not that are doing the same as you, not that are doing less than you. Surround yourself with people that are doing better than you enough that it makes you feel motivated to step up your game just a little bit. And that they look at you as someone who wants to learn. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to be fake in any way, but surround yourself with people who are ambitious, and you will become more ambitious, not in an unhealthy or prideful way, but in a way that wants to lift others up as well. So changing generational curses is not instant either. It takes time. It takes dogged commitment, and it takes failure, unfortunately. I can tell you from personal experience, when I started to reflect and see that I was carrying the baggage of generational curses inside of me and hurting those I was connected to in all ways, I had to fail forward. I had to experiment with my life and experiment with my behavior. I had to experiment with the people that I surrounded myself with, to the point where I knew I wasn't going to do it right. And I messed up more times than I didn't. But it didn't matter. I kept messing up. I kept failing forward, to the point that I found the few things that I could make work. And it was a painful process. My wife will tell you, when I was going through my personal transfer, and I'm still in it, by the way, I'm not out of it by any means. But when I began the journey into personal transformation, reflection, and when I began the journey into putting down the generational curses, one of the biggest keys in that was the willingness to fail and become vulnerable and show that pride wasn't the biggest part of my life anymore. Honesty, integrity, being a whole person was what became the priority. And that's not an easy thing to admit, because saying that is to say that it wasn't before. And that's a huge challenge. So when you find yourself on this journey and you make the choice to set out on the path to break these generational curses, give yourself permission to celebrate small wins. You're going to have a lot of tiny little, that'll feel microscopic wins that nobody else might even see. And you might be the only one that sees it, but celebrate it. When you discover something about yourself that's so real, you feel like you have just found a nugget of gold, and nobody else is there to applaud you. Nobody else is there to tell you, good job. Tell yourself, celebrate those moments, because that's real growth. And those are the things that you can build on. So generational curses are really generational choices. And unless we interrupt them, we won't end them. You don't end them with one event, but with a lifestyle of intentionality and accountability. And I promise you this, it's worth it. It's worth it. So I'm going to leave you guys with the challenge, okay? The challenge is identify one generational habit that you refuse to accept, that you refuse to pass on, and start breaking it today. It's worth it, because if you can break just one, even though it might seem small, even though it might not seem like it impacts your life all that much, the idea that you broke it and that you ended it will give you the confidence and authority and the honesty and the clarity to begin breaking more. And the more you break, the greater your future and the generations to follow you's future will become. Guys, thank you for joining me today for this episode of the Pursuit of Purpose podcast. I appreciate the entire audience. We'd love to hear from you. Any topics that you'd like us to discuss in the future, we'd love to hear from you. Y'all have a great day, and we will talk soon.